Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast, the show where we uncover what really creates freedom in life and business, and we'll explore stories of those who've learned how to build wealth with purpose.
Welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Thompson, creator of the 100K Target Life Day Framework, sales and marketing strategist, and an author of Selling Secrets of the World's Greatest Life Insurance Agent. With over 25 years in the industry, Jeff helped dozens of agents reach MDRT top of the table status. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daniel. Good to be here.
Great to have you on. Listen, let's start right from the beginning. For people that are meeting you for the first time, who is Jeff? And kind of describe it in your own words.
Wow. Okay. That's always that's a handful. I would say, as in the context of the industry, like you've already described me, I'm a strategist in the life insurance space and with a marketing and sales emphasis. So kind of helping unleash potential of the agents that I work with so that they can hopefully quickly rise to the maximum potential they're capable of. So many have become top of the table, some even multiple top of the table. Outside of that, you can probably tell by my books, I'm a lifelong learner, an avid student of almost everything that I have an interest in. That's usually my first impulse is to go buy a book on something that catches my interest and then probably buy 10 more so on that same subject and read them all. Lifelong martial arts expert. And I think a lot of my marketing strategy and thinking actually was shaped by how martial arts kind of taught me to think about strategy in the context of a sparring match. So there's many levels. It's like a chess game in high speed with kind of painful impact when things don't work out as planned. And, I think that's also true in business and in marketing. When you make the wrong move, it obviously can be financially painful. It can be costly to your reputation or a whole bunch of different things. So, but how business works on multiple levels and how strategies kind of combine to create leverage, and even how martial arts itself is a strategy to create leverage and force from your whatever you've got, right? So a smaller person can generate significant force with their body just by having the right body mechanics and technique. In marketing, I think the 80-20 rule sort of applies there, where we can get leverage and higher impact on almost anything we do. So it's a little bit of me and my philosophy and kind of how it covers, both personal and a little bit of business too.
Yeah, no, that was great. Now, you've been in the industry for, over 25 years. Take us back. What was the first thing that kind of pulled you into the world of insurance and financial services?
Well, it's an interesting path to this industry, although I think this is true for almost everybody that seems to be in our business. Mine was actually intentional, which is maybe a little different than a lot of folks. Some people just sort of find themselves in the business. My father was a very successful P&C agent, also did life insurance. And I used to kind of wonder what he did for a living because it seemed like he didn't work very often. He had built himself a really good lifestyle business. And at some point when I was quite a bit younger, I realized, although at his admonishing, he was like, yeah, you don't want to be in this industry. He was trying to discourage me from being in the business. And I'm like, I wonder why. You sleep until you're done sleeping. I'm not exactly sure when you're actually doing work and you have a high income. So this seems like the perfect scenario. And so ultimately, yeah, that and Brian Tracy, who is an early mentor of mine, kind of made it clear that was one of the areas where financial success was very possible for just about anybody that got into the business. And so I was in college at the time and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Had tried a bunch of different things, and it sort of dawned on me that my dad had maybe figured out the path, and Brian Tracy was telling me, yeah, you probably should look at it despite my dad's warnings. And I think ultimately he was happy that I got into the business and was excited about my interest in it when I finally got in it. But I know he was he was a two-time All-American wrestling champion, collegiate wrestling champion, and wanted to be a wrestling coach. That never panned out for him. So maybe that was why he didn't love the business. But P&C isn't the same as life either. I love the life insurance business because it's a very different business. I know he had mentioned he had some fraternity brothers that were quite successful in the life business that had retired before he did. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not going down the P&C route. Although, interestingly enough, that's actually where I started, was in the P&C side, and then worked my way into knowing I was going to eventually get into life insurance. I started working for AIG, and that was kind of my beginning, and had a lot of success there, and ultimately became their national sales trainer and developed a sales process for them that improved sales by north of 25% across the entire company. So I flew around the country training agents to implement a fairly simple sales process that had a really big impact, and eventually got into working in the life insurance space. Worked for Allianz as a wholesaler for a while. Got into the life settlement space, where I was the number one life settlement producer in the country for the entire industry, not just the company that I worked for. And ultimately got back into life insurance wholesaling with a great company here in Minneapolis, and built a great career with them over the last 15 years. That's actually where I developed the 100K target life day model. Did that with a guy who ultimately, to this day, I still work with, scaled his production into the millions in target per month, which many out there probably watching this podcast might think that's not possible. And I assure you it is. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, you bring a great point, and I mean, your dad kind of, not that he didn't want you to be in the business, but I think he understood that there was a lot of agents and advisors that are doing great, like him, how he was doing, but there is also a lot of individuals in the business that are kind of struggling, and I think this is where the challenge really comes in. It's kind of like, it's a great business to be in, but you have to make sure you kind of do the right things, right?
I think you have to be ready for it, have the right mindset, and maybe he recognized I wasn't quite there yet, to do it, to be successful in this business. So
yeah. Now, listen,
that
you
might have
weren't,
been some of his discouragement. So yeah.
yeah. Now, you wore many different hats, from producer, trainer, coach. What was kind of the turning point that made you want to shift, from just selling to really helping others to sell better? Because I think there's a huge difference. I think a lot of advisors, often the reason they struggle is they just don't understand some of the basics of really, it's not about selling, it's really about building relationships and building that trust, because that's what really helps with everything. So was there a turning point when you started to recognize that, there are some things that, some advisors and individuals are doing incorrectly?
Um, you know, when I was doing some personal production, that was ultimately my path, was to be a financial advisor. So, I kind of worked my way to learn all the various aspects of the business, but I had an interest in focusing on life insurance because I heard that was, where the money was at. And, um, but quickly found out that that's also one of the most difficult, maybe, services or products to sell in any industry, in any sales career. It's one of the most difficult because it's intangible and doesn't have, I mean, the only thing tangible about life insurance is, the illustration, and that's not a great sales tool. It's in fact, I would call it the anti-sales tool in most cases. For most carriers, there are a couple exceptions, but for the most part, they're not great at persuading somebody that they need life insurance. So yeah, to kind of circle back to where we started with this question, I think, if there was a turning point for me, it was, I liked coaching advisors because I had a lot of marketing and sales skill and knowledge. And it seemed like working through advisors tapped into my natural skill set better than me working directly with clients. Although I do like working with clients, I love, the technical aspects of building a case and uncovering what might be the most helpful solution for their situation. That part of it did appeal to me. I felt like maybe I was missing something. And so, being in wholesaling actually worked out to be a great kind of serendipity for me because
Hmm.
I didn't know that I would actually like that as much. I kind of was doing it to learn the industry more than anything and just really get my skill set and knowledge of the industry to a high level. But it turns out that I actually like that better because I felt like I had more impact as a coach.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think you bring something out. I think often people kind of get into a rut, right? I mean, the name of the podcast, Make Life Less Taxing, and we kind of have the movement that we're building, keep what is yours and break free. And what you're just mentioning is kind of inadvertently, you wanted to learn how to master sales, and then you discovered that you actually enjoyed it a lot more and start to understand it, how it works. And I think this is the challenge a lot of advisors have, is they just keep on doing the same thing, hoping something's going to change without really going and gaining mastery. And I think that mastery, and we've had these conversations before, comes from your martial arts background, because it's all about mastery,
Yep.
your continuous improvement and moving forward. And I think one of the individuals that you like, Bruce Lee, I love the quote that he says, "I don't fear the man that knows 10,000 kicks. I fear the man that knows, that has done one kick 10,000 times."
Yep.
Right. And
Yep. And
that's
I'm
kind of,
definitely an example of that. In my early martial arts career, I remember one of my instructors giving me some feedback. And at the time, I was struggling with, doing the technique equally well on each side of my body. So sort of this idea of being ambidextrous is kind of infused in the training. And so I was like, he'd asked me to do something, and I said I can't. And of course, that was kind of a no at the in the martial arts tree. There is no can't.
yeah,
There is no try, right? So
yeah,
so I ended up that very day, spending hours just practicing that technique over and over and over again, and continued to do that day after day until it was almost indiscernible from the other side. And so,
yeah,
you know, um, that idea of committing to mastery is important. And I think sometimes people don't even think they have to master sales. And there's a lot
mm,
to the psychology, strategy, and tactics of selling. Um, that it's not just showing up and winging it. It's about having a plan and executing on that plan in a way that doesn't feel like there is a plan.
mm.
So, you know, to the
It comes
prospect.
naturally. Yeah.
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 No, it's a great point that you just brought. I mean, I say that I'm right-handed, but the only reason I'm right-handed is because my whole life I only written with my right hand, right? If I went and
Yeah.
practice writing with my left hand, again, probably, maybe it might not be as good as my right hand, but it would be more than proficient. So I think there is that whole part. The reason we're not good at something just means that we didn't have as much practice as with what we've already been doing. And again, as you come talking about sales, it's really no different. It comes down to just continuously improving. And it doesn't mean improving going from, kind of zero to hero. It's just like, hey, every day doing like 1%, trying to fix one thing and then another thing is really important with that.
Yeah. I do think that, you have to have the commitment to mastery
Yeah.
because otherwise you're never going to do the work that gets you there.
Yeah.
And mastery is a lot different than learning a basic skill set. The basic skill set is awkward and eventually becomes less awkward, and you have some sort of skill. Mastery is in distinctions, a lot of times very subtle distinctions, and it's hard to get there if you don't stay the course. So
Mm.
it's one of those things you have to want to do and want to stick it out. And that's where you get those little subtle distinctions. That's been true in my martial arts career. And, I didn't say much about that, but that's also an area of my life that's been very significant. I'm a 5-time Minnesota State karate champion. I ultimately competed at a major world championships in the 80s and finished 4th in the world. So, I was
Mm.
very high level martial arts um, fighter. So that was kind of my area, was fighting. But that took a lot of mastery. One interesting thing I discovered about fighting in that tournament was I got to see the best in the world and how far away I was. And I could see that the difference between them and me was a little bit, but it was enough that they were at the next level up. And I'm like, okay, I can see why the guy that won and why I was fourth. And I fought the guy that won, and I couldn't hit the guy. Like his distance control and everything was so precision and at another level better than me. And I thought, okay.
We're into that one kick 10,000 times, right? Like, and I think it's just the time invested and him just perfecting the technique and doing it to the point. I mean, I love talking about martial arts. I love the movie, the first original Karate Kid, right? Wax on, wax off, right? Daniel-san, right?
Yep.
Wax on, wax off. And first time you watch, you're like, going, okay, it's just like, the guy's just trying to get him to do all of the dirty work. But then when he asked him to go and he started trying to hit him, his hands were doing those automatic movements. And I think this is what mastery is, where things become so natural to you that you don't think about it, right? And I think that's what happens in sales too. A lot of people, a lot of them might not think about sales and they just go out there and do whatever. That's not a technique, but once you start going into it, just get so comfortable with it where you don't have to think about it, what you're going to say. You're just having a natural conversation. And that's a huge difference. And often, as you mentioned, there are small little subtle things that one of those things on its own seems so insignificant, but now when you have a series of these, it's a quite a difference that it can make.
Yeah, I guess I do come from a family of successful salespeople because my mother was also a very successful salesperson in the printing business and saved a company that was failing, and turned it around. She was the only salesperson, and it was a small printing company here in Minneapolis, and she was able to drive enough revenue that she saved the company and turned it into a thriving business. And that was, a belief for me that it really reinforced my belief in the importance of sales skill to the success of a business. So having seen both my mother and father succeed in selling, one, I felt like maybe I might be able to do it too, because if they can do it, I can do it. But I also saw the importance of it in how businesses can go from struggling to thriving. So that's why it's become kind of an obsession or passion of mine, very similar to the martial arts. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, let's go back a little bit. What you mentioned that at one point you were the top salesperson in the life settlement business, doing over $350 million in 1 year. What was going on kind of behind the scenes that have really helped you to unlock that level?
Some of that was strategic thinking. I started to look at the industry and where its opportunities for improvement were, and there were a lot of those. So I started to build systems around the weaknesses that were in the industry so that I could close those. And so, there were a lot of little things that kind of built up to that, but it was an interesting opportunity. I had no experience in the life settlement business, but I had an interest in it. So at the time I was working, doing personal production, selling annuities and life insurance, stumbled across an ad in the paper and went to work for this firm that happened to be one of the pioneering firms in the life settlement business. So I got to learn a lot about that industry, and it was closer to life insurance, kind of actuarially. So it was a very technical kind of version of life insurance where you really get under the hood and understand products and how they work, how they're built, which was a great opportunity too. But when I started there, I was kind of the new sales guy on the team and was given basically everybody's picked over accounts that nobody could get to do business with them. So I got all the good accounts were basically the good or easy accounts to get business out of were cherry picked, and they already had them. So I got the bottom of the heap where literally there was no business that had come out of any of the accounts that I got. So I had a handful of accounts, started building these systems around what I saw as the opportunity within the industry where we could be unique, that we could offer a different value add than what most of the competition was doing, and started to implement that. And about 6 months in, there wasn't really much to show for it. I was thinking, is this right? Did I do the right thing? Is this the right path? And then everything exploded. And within the next, 12 months, I did nearly $350 million in sales and was the top person in the company and also the industry that year. So.
Yeah. Well, you bring an interesting point. So often the small little mastery or improvements that we were talking about, like you said, you got to do it over and over and over again. And for a long time, nothing happens. And my theory is that most advisors, they start great, whatever strategies or things they're looking at, and they just quit before they get to that explosion and they go and find something different. That was kind of my experience in,
Quit too soon. Quit
yeah,
too soon. Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's common. And I think our business, having worked with advisors for so long now, I've seen the shiny object problem kind of
yeah,
miss, it's agents sort of miss uh, identifying where the problem is. And they think that it's, if I just get a different lead system or a different marketing system or a different seminar. Most often it comes back to selling skills, although I won't say that's the only thing because there's marketing
yeah.
things that you can do to enhance your presence and your trust factor with prospects before you actually get into the sales process. But selling is often really kind of the focal point, and most folks don't want to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, I think often it's not one single thing. It's usually combination, but it starts when you fix one thing that kind of makes the next thing more visible so
Stand
that
out.
you can go and work on it. But if
Yep.
you never start, it's going to be difficult to have that improvement. So
Yeah.
listen, when you look at agents you now coach, and many of them are producing multiples of millions of dollars, what patterns do you see in the ones that kind of race to the top?
There's definitely an adoption of the 80/20 principle. So I talk about that a lot in some of my coaching sessions. I bring it up frequently. Um, that mindset shift is important because most of what you do doesn't have much impact. And identifying the things that have the highest impact is super important because that's the leverage in, I mean, it's sort of a time management thing, but it's really a priority thing. And figuring out what those things are that produce the greatest impact is what you focus on, and everything else should go. And for a lot of people, that's hard to do because, they want to control everything. I can relate to that myself. I like to control as much as I can, but I realize that trying to do everything except for my unique ability, which is what Dan Sullivan, who's a performance coach, business coach, talks about. Anything outside your unique ability is probably dragging you down. It's holding you back. It's a barrier to your next level of success.
Yeah. No, you bring a really great point. I think from the perspective of that, there's a quote. I think it was Warren Buffett that said, "My success is not from all the things that I say yes to. My success comes from saying no to the 99%, of the things that come across my desk on a daily basis." And I think this is where like that focus is the most important thing. And we see this when we work with advisors that, yeah, you know what, they're kind of looking at the next thing and keep on chasing after stuff instead of kind of stepping back and going like, hey, what is the strategy? How long do I need to give it, right, that it's going to work, and stick with it even when it seems like it's not working, because it is working. It just doesn't have enough time. It's kind of like when you're looking at train when it's leaving from the station, it seems like how can it go fast where it's gonna like has a hard time even get going. But again, once you get the train going, you got to keep it moving, right? And I think that's what happens with a lot of advisors. They barely get things moving, and just when they kind of get that momentum, they get distracted and start looking at something different, and they don't keep on working on it. And I feel often that they're almost, if they're doing marketing or something, they're preparing clients for other advisors, right? Because they've done all of the hard work, and an advisor meets that person and it clicks with them right away. That's kind of the the hardest part that comes, right?
Yeah, and I guess I would say, that whole shiny object thing and the 80/20 rule. It's hard for an agent to stick with stuff that doesn't appear to be working because everybody's got to have a paycheck, right? They need to pay the bills, and so impatience is probably your enemy in this industry, um, because most marketing and even developing sales skills with a new marketing system. So if you decide to try a new program to like a seminar system or a dinner seminar system, there's still that learning curve. You still have to go from not being competent, consciously incompetent to unconscious competence. And it's going to take some reps. It's going to take some time in before you're the one that isn't the problem causing the sales to, ghost you, the prospects to ghost you. Once you get past that point, now you're not the problem. Now it's what levers in the marketing system can we enhance, right? What levers can we tweak in the sales process to even be better? I don't know if that answered your question. I think I might have gotten
No, it does. I mean, we're back to
there.
like the wax on, wax off, right? It's all of the practicing and going and doing that over and over again that's actually going to get that. And I think the advisors that stick with it. Again, we're back to, that quote, one kick 10,000 times, right? Like, oh, I already did 1,000 times. Yeah, but do you know it enough where it's just a muscle memory and it will just go and do it, on its own? Luckily, most of the time when you're working on sales and improving, you don't have to go and do one presentation 10,000 times or say something 10,000 times to get proficient at it. But that's just kind of the idea of that, So,
well, it's like I say in a lot of the training sessions that we do, the 80-20 rule applies to the sales process too. The whole sales process isn't producing the result. There's parts of it that produce the highest impact. So you don't have to be a master of the whole thing. You just have to be a master of that part that's the highest impact. So you don't even necessarily have to master the whole thing. One of the kicks I really like in martial arts is called a side kick. And I used to do drills with a partner where we would do 1,000 kick workouts. So we would come in and we knew we were going to do 1,000 kicks. And that became such a powerful technique of mine, in sparring. People were afraid to fight me because of just that one kick. Well, why? Because I had done it probably way more than 10,000 times. So way more than 10,000 times. So it was a scary kick for most people to be on the receiving end of, because of that repetition and
and again, and put it that way, it's not to diminish your skills, but the reason you had those skills is because you just practiced it more than the next guy. And I think that's what, when it comes to sales and when it comes to advisors, that's what they don't understand. They look at somebody and they think like, oh, look at this. He was just like naturally born salesperson. I don't know how about you. I've never met, a child being born and naturally good in sales. No, it's a learned skill and having that mastery in it. And I think that's where the difference is, where, somebody that's not really good at sales. And I think the greatest sales professionals that are out there, probably when they started, they felt like they were the worst, and maybe they were the worst. They weren't able to do anything, but again, because they stuck with it and they learned it and they perfected, that's why they are where they are at, and it's a skill. And I think that's where most advisors feel like, oh, I'm already good enough, I don't have to practice. It's like, no, I've never met anybody that's at a higher level that says, oh, it's okay, I'm good enough, I don't have to do anymore. No, the true masters, they know that even when they have done, like you said, done that kick, more than 10,000 times, you're still like going, hey, I still going to go and practice it and do more of it, because there is always another level and getting more comfortable with that.
Well, interestingly, that was the 80-20 in my martial arts repertoire, right? They had this one kick that was so formidable that people were terrified of sparring with me because they thought they were just going to get their ribs broken. And, one of the mentors I had in martial arts is a guy named Joe Lewis. He was one of the first, famous karate championships, not the boxer. He was a famous karate guy and trained with Bruce Lee, actually. He was known for two techniques, his back fist and his reverse, three techniques, his back fist, his reverse punch, and a side kick. So, but his side kick was very formidable. And that was kind of, it had a very similar, at the time I didn't know that, but years later, I learned that was his main technique that most people feared him for. And
secret weapon.
And I just by chance happened to, develop that same technique. But so yeah, there is an 80-20 to almost everything, and for sure in selling and even in the sales process itself. So
yeah. Well, listen, you're the creator of the 100K Day Target Life Day framework. Tell us a little bit more about it. Where did it come from, and what's really the problem that you're solving with it?
Well, I had recognized that a lot of agents either didn't have a budget or weren't willing to spend anything on marketing. So I thought, well, why don't we figure out a way to put them in a position where they can and where they have some breathing room so that they can have a lifestyle practice. So that was kind of where it started, was what can we do right now, day one, with whatever you bring to the table and help you unlock opportunities that you didn't see before. Scale the transaction size so that you're making more per transaction than maybe most advisors earn in a year. So that's where the name the 100K day came from, or the 100K target life day. And so started to piece those things together. As a marketing guy, my whole approach to this business is trying to find the irresistible offer to a high value market. And so a lot of the strategies and unique ideas that we coach kind of become the lens that opens the door to a new vein of opportunity within your network, within the people within your existing client base. And I, being in martial arts, I was looking for ways to create leverage for advisors. So the idea of not having to spend money on marketing, but still be able to make a 6-figure day was kind of a compelling idea for me to solve that problem. And that's really where the whole formula came from and all the elements to it. So, yeah. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned it previously, kind of a lot of people in sales start somewhere. I mean, most of us aren't natural. It is a learned skill. I would say there are people that have a lot of attributes that make them naturally good at building trust or generating rapport. These are all elements of the sales process, right? That can make you fairly successful even out of the gate without having to learn stuff, learn, strategies, tactics, and psychology and the whole works. But that might only get you to a certain level. I think, in my case, when I got into the business, I was terrible. I didn't know how to sell. I started at age 16 and was like, I was on straight commission, not making any money, probably on the verge of being fired, and I picked up Tom Hopkins' book, How to Master the Art of Selling. So anybody that knows me, I talk about this a lot too. I just read a few chapters and immediately started to apply some of the stuff that was in there, which was really just, asking questions and turning the tables on the prospect. So instead of being on the receiving end of all these questions that maybe I didn't answer well, maybe I didn't know the answer to, I lost authority and credibility, I started asking the questions, and all of a sudden my sales skyrocketed, and I went from being kind of a part-time, kid making no money to being the top salesperson, working against, I was working with people that were mostly full-time, 40-hour work week folks, and I was working 13 hours a week making more than they were, all because I read a few chapters of a book. Actually, ultimately read the whole thing many times and made a study of it because I was so amazed at being able to take something out of this book and have it translate into my paycheck, So that put me on a never-ending, path of, studying, selling, and marketing, and becoming better and better at it over my career.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. And I think it's all about systems. I mean, I remember when I started in the business, started strictly selling disability insurance. And I remember what we did, we would find somebody, primarily worked with contractors. And we had this legal size binder. There were 2 pages that were printed out. And the way we were taught, just go and read it word for word. I didn't have any sales experience. The first year in the business, I did over $100,000 in premium for disability insurance. This is back like 30 years ago. But I didn't understand what was happening. But all I was doing, I was just reading the script word for word. At the end, they gave me a check, right? And I did not understand. It took me like 18 years to figure out what it was. But again, it was a system and a process, and they knew exactly every word on that page was there for a purpose, for a reason to go and do something. And again, fresh out of college, didn't have any sales experience. I did not understand it, what and how it worked. I just knew that it worked. Now I understand what we're talking about here. Like there are certain things, small little words that if you say is either bringing somebody closer to you, or if you say a word, it's pushing them away. And when I see a lot of advisors, unfortunately, the language and things they're using is usually pushing people more away than they're pulling them in. And I think this is the challenge that a lot of advisors have. It's not that they're bad at sales. It's just like they don't understand that there are certain kind of mechanisms and certain words that are the ones that are making the difference. And we're back to those small little things that advisors need to be aware of.
Yeah, it's, I think to kind of add to that, I would say, advisors um, who don't think selling skills are important to actually make a study of, that limits your potential in the business for sure. The other thing I'd say about that is marketing. If you choose not to do marketing, and that is a big area, obviously, um, the most successful advisors I know also do marketing of some sort. And that can vary from setting up, centers of influence, strategic partnerships, paid advertising, but they're doing something that is proactively getting them in front of their ideal clients on a regular basis. And so they get a lot of at-bats, a lot of practice, if they look at it that way, that every time I meet with somebody, I have an opportunity to hone my skills and become better at the sales process. I think that's a great mindset to have. Um, Not everybody treats it that way, unfortunately, but now when you make a change, you can make that change and start to see results, sort of like I did when I first read that Tom Hopkins book and took a few techniques and started them and immediately saw how much better things worked.
Yeah.
Just from a simple technique that I hadn't used before. So.
You just mentioned something. You mentioned sales and marketing, which is rare of actually putting those two things together often, right? How do you how did you start integrated both of them, and why is it so? Why does it matter now more than ever, right? In this day and age.
Yeah, I would say, the marketing piece is super important. How you position yourself and who you go after in terms of target market is a very important piece of the puzzle, because if you don't do anything in that area and you do have good sales skills, you'll make a good living. But if you want to have an exponential and a compounded result, the marketing piece has to work in alignment with the sales process. So they really are kind of one and the same thing along a continuum. Marketing is really more what happens before the sales process, maybe even after the sales process begins. But before the sales process begins is how you show up and how your market perceives you. And I would say some of the top agents that I do work with have still a lot of room to improve in terms of their selling skills, but they got the positioning part right. And so that piece helped lower the sales resistance as people come through their funnel. So whether that's working through a center of influence where you're getting essentially referrals from a high trust source, that lowers your need to be a highly skilled salesperson. You can have a lower level of sales skill if you have the marketing right. So that's you know, they're two levers that work hand in hand. They're part of a continuum. And I think, you can succeed with having one or the other, at a high level. But, if you really want that explosive growth, you want to compound them by combining them together. So.
Yeah. No, I think as you mentioned, they kind of support each other, right? Like you can't have one without the other, because if you just focus on sales, then you're like, used car salesman and you're just pushing something on somebody. But if you do your marketing, you learn something about that person and you know something about that market and you're actually attracting them. So now when you're having a conversation, you're not trying to convince them. You're just trying to help them a decision. Hey, what's the next best step for that individual if they have the need for the solution or the product that you have, right? So you're not there pushing something that they don't want.
Yeah, I would say selling generally becomes much easier when you've targeted your market and you know that you're talking to the right people with the right offer, and that irresistible offer to that market, lowers resistance to closing the deal.
Yeah.
There are a lot more people that are going to say yes to what your offer is because you're not showing up with a mismatch. You have a market message and solution match, right? So, and
Yeah.
if it's something that, if you can find that irresistible offer for that market, that lowers the resistance to selling considerably.
Yeah. Uh, you've said that most agents and advisors don't have a sales problem, they have a clarity problem. Can you break that down? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so that does start with kind of the beginning of the 100K day. Knowing who your ideal client is, who you want to be as an advisor. I think that's kind of there's a lot of folks out there that want to be the buffet. They're the everything in under the kitchen sink. And I know you have some experience with going down that path, thinking
Yeah,
that would help your business, and it actually made it worse, gave you worse outcomes. And that's true. The power of focus again and niching and knowing who your ideal client is, and maybe just staying in that lane is way more powerful than trying to, be the jack of all trades and serve everybody with whatever it is that might come up because they have a need. The idea of having every service under the sun so that if somebody ever has a problem of any type, you've got some sort of an answer in your toolbox, isn't a path to
no,
top of the table. I mean, that would be a rocky road to top of the table. I haven't met one yet,
sure.
to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, what do you think that kind of the industry as a whole gets wrong about how they train and support advisors? Like, put it that way, for me, one of the reasons why I got out of the industry was because I started to realize that the industry wasn't really teaching me how to help people. It was teaching me more how to sell their products. Right. And one day I woke up and I realized that the realization that I had, I thought I was building a business. And then I realized I just had a job, just, over broke. And it was like, if I wasn't, I was the business. Right. So, what do you think that, advisors kind of get wrong? And it's more about kind of that mindset shift, right?
Well, I mean, I think the industry, if there are any criticisms, I would say um, it is very product focused. Almost all the training that comes from carriers is product focused. So yeah, the idea of products being kind of the end all be all for a prospect isn't really a path to success either. Not that
Yeah.
you have to use products obviously to implement something, but really the idea that drives most successful practices is people that have a sincere desire to help their clients and look for the best possible solutions for them. Um, and staying in a narrow lane, serving that one kind of client avatar that's their ideal client, um, so that you really know who they are and what they need and how you can serve them the best. And I think that's not taught enough in our business. I think, again, it's like an endless array of product webinars. So, it kind of by default, the FMOs and carriers are kind of telling you, hey, it's all about product
Hmm.
rather than it's about uncovering somebody's needs and serving that person's needs. And ideally, for scalability, you want to focus in on just that ideal client avatar so that you get really good at helping that type of person and can develop some unique value propositions around
Yeah.
serving that person.
Oh, you bring that point again. That's exactly why I got out of the business. It was like they were not. And again, I'm not trying to sit here and slam the industry and all that stuff. There's a lot of great individuals and a lot of people are helping. But for me, I just started to look at it and going like, hey, I really want to go and help that individual. But as you mentioned, the industry makes it more about the product. And it's like, go out there and sell this product or go and do this instead of like, what is the true problem and how do we identify the problem that we're not seeing yet? Because there's usually a problem behind the problem. We're just not asking deep enough questions to truly find out what that individually wants and looking for the solutions that are not self-evident right from the beginning, and they only become evident when you start digging down deeper into and having a deeper conversation. And I think the industry, at least for me, what it did, it just taught me go and figure out what is the product they need, and kind of that's I think where a lot of advisors start like, hey, everybody's got a need for final expense. Well, just go and sell that. It's like, well, hold on, there's a lot more how you can help that individual than just go and selling somebody a term 10 policy that might not be the best advice for them. It may seem like that, but it may not be because you just have not gone deep enough and you have not really identified the challenges and the real problems that they're having.
Well, I think some of it just comes down to, the industry. When we get into advanced life insurance stuff, um, we are able to see different ways that we can solve problems that people haven't realize they had that problem to begin with. So we're uncovering problems that the consumer didn't know they had, with solutions they don't know anything about, they've never seen before. And this is true with the agents as well. I would say 99% of the advisors, or maybe more than that, 99.99% of the advisors and agents I talk to, don't know what they don't know about some of the solutions that we can offer that create that irresistible offer. So that's also part of the 100K day formula. That's how do we help craft that irresistible offer once we have clarity about who our ideal client is.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Now, you've coached dozens of MDRT top of the table advisors and agents. What's the most fulfilling part of that for you?
Well, I mean, it's fun when they start to have kind of the lifestyle they had hoped to achieve. So to me, that's a really fun part of the business, is when we get past the struggle part of their career and get into maybe this more comfortable lifestyle practice that they feel is what they got into the business to build. It's fun to solve the problems that come up with their clients. I love kind of digging in to see, what are we working with here? What acres of diamonds can we find in this scenario? Are there any diamonds that are just sitting right there on the surface of the land that we just hadn't noticed before? So, and it's fun when we can find those and really help somebody put their client in a much better position.
Yeah, no, and it's, again, you bring a great point. It's really fulfilling. And again, I personally believe there's 2 days that are most important in somebody's life: the day that they're born and the day that they discover why. And I think this is what it comes down to, is what we're building with the movement, Keep What Is Yours and Break Free, is how do we help advisors to go and break free from the traditional way of doing things, not only for them, traditional way of building a business and what they're doing and how they're operating, but also help their clients to kind of unplug from the financial services. So, listen, Jeff, as we're going to be closing down here, I think we're going to have to go and do more of these, and we will, because I did not go a little bit more in deeper. But appreciate you sharing kind of about you. You know what? I've got these 4 questions. I call them rapid fire questions, and the first one might be a little bit of a tough one for you to answer, but it's kind of like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? That's kind of behind this. What's a favorite book that shaped your thinking? And you've got literally hundreds of books behind you, so you're just looking for one.
Yeah. I think the easy answer there would be the Bible. That's probably the one that, when I finally decided to spend a little time with it, that kind of created a foundational way. It was like an instruction manual for how to lead your life so that you don't run into problems. How to lead a successful life, I think, is built right in there. And that was a starting point. So
no, listen, I'm keeping mental track. I do believe that's the number one answer that we have when we ask that question. So you're in a good company. So that's awesome. Is there a morning routine or a habit that you can't live without?
most days I start with some sort of affirmations
Mm.
or meditation. And usually that's kind of to get my mind going. So that's usually the starting point. I don't usually get up early enough to do exercise. That's usually evenings and weekends. But so yeah, it's more of a mental, kind of having a morning mental routine, morning mental workout.
Yeah, no, that's, again, I think that's the number one answer, is meditation or some type of quiet time and doing that. What's one bucket list item that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
I at some point want to travel to every continent
Mm.
on the planet. Haven't done that yet. So, and then probably visit the um, pyramids at Giza,
Mm.
and maybe some of the other wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal, that sort of touristy
Yeah.
stuff. But the most remarkable things, I've been to the Grand Canyon, so that one's off my list. But
Yeah.
although
Oh,
I would go back because it was
yeah.
pretty amazing. So
No, that's great. You just mentioned Taj Mahal. I saw it. I saw it across the river. I could not get in
yeah,
when I was in India myself, so
yeah,
that's still on my bucket list to actually go inside. What's
go
a
inside it.
surprising
Yeah.
yeah. What's a surprising hobby or interest that really recharges you?
I don't often have enough time to do it, but I actually love cooking. So many years
Mm.
ago, I decided I would take a bunch of cooking classes, and I learned how to, make pastas from scratch and focaccia and pizza and, you name it. And then I kind of niched down into making appetizers because a lot of my family events were like, hey, bring something. And I'm like, well, maybe if I learn how to make these really delicious appetizers and come up with different things, um, you know, people would request that. Well, that's what happened. I learned how to, make all these unique little appetizers. And so most of the time when I was asked to bring anything, I'd bring some appetizer, but it's fun. It's fun. It's sort of like, when you've helped a client in our business and they've really got what they needed and they feel that peace of mind. This is a little different, but it's fun when somebody really
Yeah.
enjoys something you created. So
Yeah. Well, we've known each other for 6 years. I did not know that about you. So that's interesting. That's one of my passions too. I don't do it as much as I used to. I actually originally, before I got into the business, before I got actually college, I actually thought of becoming a chef, but my mother kind of steered me a little bit more into the business side of things, taking business
I,
administration, marketing at
I have a
college. So
nephew that is, so he
yeah.
really kind of took that to another level and works at a fancy high-end restaurant here in
Yeah.
town. But
I've always thought of going like on a cruise ship or something like that. It sounded really interesting, but I'm happy with it because the working in the restaurants, it's almost like a 24-hour a day job, and I did that all the way
yeah,
through
it's
high school and college. So, but
a little tougher to build a lifestyle business there, but it's possible. It's
yeah,
still
yeah.
possible, but it's maybe a little tougher.
A little bit more tougher, yeah. Now, I've got one last question. I call it the hot one. Fast forward to the end of your life and imagine that everyone forgot everything that you have ever taught them or showed them, but they do remember one message from you. What would you want that message to be?
I think protect your integrity. You
Yeah,
know, I think that's it's priceless, and I think not enough people um, go out of their way to make sure that their reputation and their integrity stays intact,
yeah,
especially in this business. I think that's it's all about relationships and trust, and if you don't have integrity and that is your reputation, I think it's going to be a tough
tough.
a tough ride in this business for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. Yeah, your own word is the only thing that you can protect. Like whatever you say, and integrity comes with that, right? So always be careful what you say and how you say it. Don't burn bridges. I always kind of give benefit of the doubt to the other person. So that's a great message. Oh, Jeff, what a powerful and bit of a perspective shifting conversation. Thank you again for sharing your journey. Uh, where can people find out a little bit more about you and the work that you do?
There's a couple of different ways, but probably the easiest way is, maybe go find me on my LinkedIn page, or, I work a lot with the Institute of Untaxable Wealth, so you can find me there. I also do some work with Ascendrium Financial Partners, so you can find me there. So a few different places you can find me. Soon you'll be able to find me once my book comes out. You'll be able to find that. That's coming soon. So
Perfect. So if you're listening, be sure to check out Jeff sites. We'll have the links in the show notes. And actually, we probably should do the next. Maybe we'll do the next podcast together, talking about your book and some of the things that you're doing there. So, hey Jeff,
yeah,
thank you
that'd be great.
again for your time and your message. And remember, making life less taxing isn't just about money; it's about freedom, clarity, and purpose. Keep building wealth, keep protecting your legacy, and keep living the untaxable lifestyle. We'll see you next time on the Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Thank you again, Jeff.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Be sure to check out our other top advisor interviews at makelifelesstaxingpodcast.com.